Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cookbook. I'm Iris Goldfeder, your host, and I'm excited about today's guest, Sam Liebowitz. We actually met on our friend Kat Stancic has a podcast mixer every month, and we met and thought that we'd be a good fit to be on a podcast. So we actually spoke for the first time about, now an hour ago, because we've had some technical difficulties. And I'm really thrilled to have him on. I think this is going to be an awesome episode. So I'm going to read Sam's bio and then bring him on. Okay. Sam Liebowitz, known as the Conscious Consultant, is a mentor, coach, speaker, healer, serial entrepreneur, and is a two-time best-selling author and author of the #1 empowerment book, Everyday Awakening. He has been in business since 1993 and has owned several successful businesses. His current ventures include Conscious Consultant, a coaching and mentoring service which promotes sensible, ethical, moral, and conscious ways to build careers and businesses, Talking Alternative Broadcasting, excuse my dog in the background, sorry, an internet radio station, which reaches over 120 countries and 300,000 listeners worldwide, and Double Diamond Wellness, a healing center in the heart of Manhattan. In these various roles, Sam has inspired hundreds of people to live a life that is happier, healthier, and more fulfilled. Sam has lectured in several venues in New York City, including being a featured speaker at TEDx Upper West Side in 2016. So without further ado, let's bring Sam on.
I don't know if I can compete with.
I don't know if you can compete with Skylar. She's like on a roll. Well, because FedEx decided to deliver now. They deliver 10 a.m., but of course now. So before this, we actually were recording this, and we had an issue with some technology. But we were talking about Yerner and I never knew it existed. So I'm like I must be a bad Jewish New Yorker for that, because, oh my God, I'm sure my family is listening to this going, how did you not know about Yerner? But I didn't know about fruit flavored knishes. Like, what is that even? I mean,
oh, they're wonderful. They're wonderful. They put in like the sweet cheese, the ricotta cheese. They're to die for. I mean, they're huge. Back when my mom was still alive, when me and my wife would go down and if we were on the Lower East Side near East Houston Street, if we stop by, I'd pick up a couple and then I'd bring them to her, and she would towards the end of her life, she was older, she didn't eat as much, but she'd cut them in quarters and eat it over a long period of time. I even, after she moved to Israel to be close to my sister, I actually brought some to her, and she had them for the week I was there, she finished them before the end of the week.
That's amazing. It's like, we go to New York and we have to bring back black and white cookies, but now we're going to be bringing back knishes.
Yeah. And bagels. You got to bring back bagels.
Well, we always bring back bagels. Well, but now they have, what is it? The Bagel Club or something. And they ship bagels nationally. So it's Bagel Boss out of Long Island.
Oh, really? And
they're really good freaking bagels. So when I don't bring them home, because we bring everything back, when we come home. But then during, the winter months when we're not in New York and we're here, I order from Bagel Boss and I get my bagels and we're good. And my wife now knows the difference between a real freaking bagel. And we first moved here and there was this place called New York Bagels, and she ate it and I ate it and I spit it out. And she's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, these are good. I'm like, because you haven't been to New York yet, because she wasn't my wife at the time, And so we went to New York and she ate a real bagel and she was like, oh, I'm ruined forever. So,
next time you come to New York, I'll take you to Yerner. You look me up, okay?
You for sure. So now you said the Bronx. Where in the Bronx?
So I grew up in this neighborhood in the northwestern corner called Kingsbridge Heights.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know where that is.
Yeah. So right next to Riverdale. I actually went to junior high school in Riverdale.
Okay. So I went to PS 81. Before we moved to Forest Hills, my dad lived right off of Henry Hudson Parkway in the Blackstone.
Hmm.
And he lived, well, that was in his older years. In my younger years, he was on Greystone Avenue off of Riverdale Avenue.
Ah, yes.
So that's like my old stomping grounds over there. So
Yeah.
I was born on Clark Place off of the Grand Concourse.
See, I was
So
actually born in Manhattan,
yeah,
and
Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital is where I was born.
I was born. Oh, Fifth Avenue. Yeah, the hospital doesn't. I was actually born in Mount Sinai.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
here's the freaky thing: the apartment I live in now, I'm on the west side, but I have a view of the park going to the east, Central Park, and I can see Mount Sinai from my dining room window.
Oh my God.
Never in a million years did I ever think I would end up living in eyesight from where I was born.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah,
crazy. And I'm nowhere near where the hell I was born right now. So,
yeah,
that's like a whole nother story. But yeah, no, the hospital is gone that I was born in.
right.
Um, it became something. I don't know what.
Yeah,
My
yeah. I
friend,
actually have a friend who was born in that same hospital.
well, now you have another one. So
Yeah,
now you have two. See, there you go.
yay.
See, and there's my there. It's going like by the end of this, by the end of this podcast, my friend Michelle is probably listening, dying right now, because she listens to these on her way, on her commute.
Mhm.
And she's heard my New York like every once in a while, but by the time this thing is done, she's going to be like, that's what it sounds like. So,
Yeah,
so
now,
you've had like a lifetime of businesses and holy shnikes, like just so much stuff. So let's, I want to talk about what you're doing now, but let's talk about how you got to what you're doing
sure,
now. Yeah.
sure. How far back do you want me to go? Because these gray hairs, I earned them.
Well,
I've been
I
around the
know it
block
was
a few times.
93 and I know we talked
Right.
about that a little. So, I don't know, go back as far as you want, because it's a hell of
Okay,
a story.
so at the time, I had been working for this nonprofit organization. It was a trade association for risk managers. It was called RIMS, and I was looking around, and I knew I had a lot of friends who were computer consultants, and they were like making so much more money than I was as an employee. So I decided to become a consultant, but I didn't do it right away. First, I found a friend who did a newsletter for this volunteer organization we were a member of, and he was already a computer consultant. I wanted to learn how to do it, and so I started working with him like evenings and weekends. And I worked with him for like a year. It was kind of almost like having two jobs. And he said, and then eventually like a big enough project came along, and he goes, "Okay, Sam, here's this project. You can leave your place if you want." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I left. And then of course the place I was working at became my client for like the next 6, and I made more in 6 months than I did in a full year working full time.
Wow.
And the interesting thing was, though, like a couple of years later, he said to me, Sam, I had so many people coming to me at that time who wanted to all work with me and learn how to become a consultant, but none of them stuck around as long as you. They'd show up for like a week or two, and then I'd never see them again. And he said, you were the only one. And this is like an important thing. It's like when you really want to do something, you've got to be committed to it. You got to put in the time. It doesn't happen on your timeline.
Right.
And so so that was a big lesson for me, and we worked together for a while, and then he had this company called Software Sculptors, but then I got involved, and we started doing something different. We got involved with the Japanese animation craze before it was a craze. And it was really funny how we got into it. Is we were both kind of Star Trek geeks, and we go to the Star Trek conventions.
I want to see pictures of that, by the way, but go ahead.
Blackmail pictures. I don't think I have too many of them. But we would notice how like these guys who would go to Star Trek, how they had these, that there were these guys there selling these bootleg Japanese animation videos, and we'd buy them and watch them and stuff. And we actually, the first thing we did was create screensavers. I don't know if you remember After Dark, but these video screensavers. And so John had the idea of like, well, look, all these Star Trek geeks, they're all geeks. They all have like the latest computer hardware. CD-ROMs had like just kind of come out. And so he went and he contacted different publishers who had licensed stuff from Japan, and through them got rights to create these anime video screensavers. And we came out like with 2 or 3 of them, and they did really well. And so then we thought, okay, let's get into the video side of things. And then we licensed some TV series or some animation series, but we didn't really know the video business. And what happened was we were incurring all of our costs, and we had to pay our vendors in 30 days. But these big video distributors, they weren't paying us in 30 days. They weren't paying us in 60 days. They weren't even paying us in 90 days. They would string us out for like 120 to 180 days before they would pay their invoices.
God.
And so we didn't have the resources to keep going. So then, one day I got back from a convention and I made all this money, and John was like, Sam, we got to sell the business. Like it's not working. We don't have enough funds. We got too many bills. So then he went around, and it was so funny. He used to drive a motorcycle around Manhattan, like a small dirt bike almost, just to get around, because it was much easier than driving a car in Manhattan. And he got there, and he was a little bit late with the meeting with this guy who had this other company. And he had trouble, and he couldn't lock up his helmet, so he had to take his helmet up with him. And he's like, "Oh man, I don't want to take the helmet up." But he decided, "Okay, what am I going to do?" So if the guy doesn't like it, So he goes up and he sits down and he's having this conversation with this guy, and he noticed there's this big poster on the wall behind him of this like chick in a bikini on a motorcycle. And he looks at this guy's phone, and he has a motorcycle as a phone, and he's got motorcycle paraphernalia all over the place. And so suddenly this guy he's talking to negotiate buying his company sees him with a motorcycle, and he goes, "Wait a minute, you ride?" And he goes, "Yeah." Turns out this guy is a complete motorcycle fanatic, and the two of them bonded over motorcycles, and it was a done deal by the end of the meeting.
Wow.
And so we then became a wholly owned subsidiary of this other company. But after like just a couple of months, we realized this guy who was running this other company, he was a lunatic. And so we started doing some computer consulting on the side again to raise money. And then we started Media Blasters together, which then we left its company and built up Media Blasters. And I stayed with them. We went from 0 in sales to about $1 million in sales after about 3-4 years. And then I kind of left, and John kept the company going and built it up eventually to like 10 million in sales. But then I think the internet kind of destroyed the company, because we used to sell videos, and the streaming stuff was much harder to negotiate. So he still has the business, but it's not nearly what it once was.
Yeah.
But that was also a lesson in, industries change, and you got to be nimble.
Yeah. And, you have to be able to pivot, right? I mean, I think that's everything is, if COVID taught us nothing, besides the fact that I love my dog, but Skylar, knock it off. Sorry. When I unfortunately I have to do this from home, and,
of course, as anyway, we all are these days.
I know, but I swear to God, she's quiet until this thing happens. And then her sister just sits there and like watches her, and like Piper's very quiet, but Skylar, as soon as the curtain moves, it's over. But anyway.
So last summer, I was dog sitting for this couple, and I'm actually going to be dog sitting for them again in San Diego. And they have 2 big dogs, a black lab and an Airedale. And an Airedale is like a giant terrier, and pretty high strung.
Yeah.
So the lab was relatively quiet and pretty good, but the Airedale would bark at everything. And so when the Airedale would start barking, then the lab would start barking with him. And it would be just like, so it's like I had to tell everybody on all my business meetings while I was out there, I was like, look, I'm dog sitting a couple of dogs. You're going to hear them. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. I had this is like so funny. I had when COVID was going on, Skylar was a puppy. We had Gizmo. Gizmo passed away in 22, but and Gizmo would start, and then Piper, Skylar, but Skylar's bark was a lot higher pitched then. Mm-hmm. So I had Gizmo, who's an American Eskimo, and then Skylar, and then the 2 of them in concert. And I can't tell you how many meetings it was like, just go ahead. And thank God, like these prospective clients and my, current clients were really understanding, and they, would laugh. And then, but my dog would start their dogs. So then it would be like, just, dog barking constantly. And it was like, oh my God, I'll call you back in a half hour when when this stops. So,
I
but
can relate.
I
can
love them.
relate.
They're our kids. But so, it's so interesting because I know you talk about, the anime thing and but the whole pivoting thing, I think when COVID happened, so many businesses had to pivot. And if they couldn't pivot, they closed. And one of my favorite pivot stories is about a local business here. I'm going to give a shout out to Bistro 501. It's Mary Buckley and her two daughters, Teresa and Cheyenne. They own this really, nice little restaurant. And when COVID hit, she started doing a market. So she would start selling all of their ingredients like lettuce and, all of the things, right? And then with every order, she would put in a roll of toilet paper and a little teeny thing of hand sanitizer. Brilliant.
Great.
We got most of our groceries, from them. Another friend of mine who owns another restaurant, DNR, he did the same thing. I mean, he is a market, but he had to figure out a way to, get deliveries, happen. And it was just crazy. But what they did was just unbelievable. And now they have like a freaking market right next to the restaurant, and the restaurant feeds off the market. It's crazy. It was pretty amazing.
It was really interesting to see what happened at the beginning of the pandemic because, and I was very lucky because I already was familiar with Zoom. Like most people just learned about Zoom when the pandemic. I'd been using Zoom because of a virtual networking I'd been doing beforehand for 3-4 years. But I remember when Cuomo issued the order that we had to kind of lock down, and I had to figure out how we did all this stuff to run the radio station in our studio, in a small studio, which we couldn't social distance.
Right.
So then I remember that Friday afternoon, I backed up the hard drive, packed everything into my knapsack I thought I would need, came home, and then it's like, okay, how do I figure this out? How do we do things remotely with Zoom, feed in the music, the commercial breaks, record it, stream it out to the live stream, do all these different things. And at the time, I didn't quite realize it, but I just did it because it's just what was. I didn't have any resistance to the fact. And,
right.
And the Buddhists say that suffering is caused by not by resisting what is. And I didn't resist what was, but I know so many people who are speaker trainers who their whole business was speaking in front of live audiences and doing events live.
Yep.
And they had a really hard time. And because, at first they didn't want to do it. They thought the pandemic would be over in a couple of weeks. My wife is from China, and so we knew what was going on in China before, way back when. So it's like we knew, this is for the long haul. But so many people resisted what was, and their business really suffered because of it. And I consider myself so fortunate that I've done enough personal inner work that when this all happened, it was just like, okay, this is the new reality. What do we got to do?
This is the new normal.
Like, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is so awful. This and that.
Right.
Not bemoaning what was.
Right. And it was funny because, my business, I never thought of working nationally. I never would have thought of that, in a million years. And COVID hit, and it was really funny because Kofi, right before COVID hit, it was like, I really believe it was meant to be. The more I think about it. So 3 years, almost to the day yesterday, I went into the studio with him and, batch recorded a whole bunch of, content, video content for LinkedIn and wherever. But it was almost 3 years to the day. And he said to me, you need to be doing video. And I was like, I never need to be doing video. I don't have a video face. And he goes, you need to be doing video. And I'm like, I don't look like Amanda. I don't look, to me, I thought that you had to be hot and, whatever to be on video. So finally he convinced me to do it. So I do it. And we go in and, we do this thing, and I know my shit, but I still have everything up on the 60-inch monitor, and I'm looking like I'm thinking, and meanwhile I'm reading, and then I'm talking, and whatever. So COVID hits, and now I'm like stuck home, and I used to do my sales knocking on doors, right? Or networking events or, whatever. And now I'm home. What am I going to do? So I got on LinkedIn and I started talking to every marketing, like anytime I would see a marketing thread, I would hop on, I would start talking. Eventually I met Nina Fareep. And she had this video pod thing where, it was basically learning how to use video to market. And I was so, as resistant as I was in January, it was like, this is what we have to do. Right. So I started doing it. And by May, everybody looked like crap. I had my body rate, thing going, down the middle of my head, and everyone looked like crap. And it didn't matter. What mattered was the message.
Right.
And that was such a huge eye opener for me. And I started getting my message out there. And then I started getting national clients. And It was like, holy shit, I have a client in California. I'm in Lafayette, Indiana. How the hell? Wait a minute. I have a client in Colorado. I got a client in New York. It was like all of a sudden, like I got these clients everywhere. And now because of it, I have clients wherever I'm,
right.
Probably going to be going international soon. So
the same thing kind of happened with me because I've been running talkradio.nyc for over 12 and a half years now. And I always was resistant to the idea of going virtual because I felt I just couldn't get the same quality of audio sound that you could in studio when you're virtual. And you still can't. I mean, you can get pretty close, but still not quite as good. But once I was forced to because of the pandemic, I realized like all of a sudden I was open to having hosts, not just in New York City, but anywhere. And now, like 2.5 years later, I've had hosts as far away as London, England, and Sydney, Australia.
Wow.
And all across the United States. Now, most people might say, well, Sam, but you're talkradio.nyc. What are you doing having people on and they're not in New York City? And I'm like, I'm a native New Yorker. You right. Ask any native New Yorker, and New York is the center of the universe. So I'm okay with people coming on the network from anywhere.
Right. And it's true. It's like I was telling my friend Annette, you could take the kid out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the kid.
Absolutely.
It is what it is. You're, once a New Yorker, always a New Yorker. So how does the host thing work? Like you get people just to host one of your shows, or how does that?
Right. So we're a network, and we're really modeled after your old-fashioned talk radio network, radio station. Except that
10-10 wins, was that
right,
it?
like 10-10 wins or NPR, something like that.
Yeah.
But the difference is we're what you call a pay-for-play station because the host is getting the services from us because we're kind of like a done-for-you solution. So if somebody wants to start doing a show, they don't have to figure out all the technology. They just need to be able to use Zoom, have a decent microphone, and we take care of the rest. We have production assistants who take care of social media. We do our own newsletter. We have the technology and the platform that the host just shows up and gets their guest. They do their genius, and then we take care of the rest. And we do the shows live. We stream it out live. We stream the videos to YouTube, and then we record everything. And then afterwards, we post it to our website. We get complete show transcripts. We get show summaries done by the production assistants, and then we post it to all the podcasting platforms. So this way, you don't have to figure it all out. We've already got it figured out. So we save you a whole bunch of time, and you're part of a network. You're not just doing your own little show. And so you get a visibility on all the different shows on the network. All my hosts are really good. They meet each other every month for a host meeting. They've all been guests on each other's shows, and they all shout each other out. So it's not like you're doing a show all on your own. You've got this whole community, this whole network kind of supporting you in the process.
Wow, that's really cool. I did not know that. That's awesome. I mean, I think that's an awesome thing. We do this thing. We do podcast production, but on obviously a smaller scale. But I love that. I love that idea of like the different hosts getting together and all that. So you, the show is for entrepreneurs. So the first question that I always ask is, what made you decide to become an entrepreneur? But I think we kind of covered that because with everything that you went through. So what advice would you have for somebody thinking about becoming an entrepreneur now?
So I used to actually teach for some outsource placement companies a course on how to go from being an employee to a freelancer. And one of the biggest things I noticed through the people coming up was there had to be a real change in mindset. Because when you're an
Oh yeah.
employee, you're used to getting your paycheck each and every week. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, that ain't
No.
happening. So, like when you had a good month and you made a bunch of money, you had to save that money. You could not spend it because 2 months or 3 months from then, you might not be getting so many checks in the mail. So, you might need
Right.
to hold on to that. And the other thing that's a real mindset change is also as an entrepreneur, you need to always be thinking about the next thing, like the next gig or the next customer. So you got to constantly be, like they say, rainmaking. You got to go out and make connections and network and meet people,
Right.
even if you're doing well at the moment, even if you've got more than enough business in the moment, that may not last. You always need to be planting seeds and watering those seeds and sort of farming and tilling the crops for later in the season so that when things dry up a little bit, all the seeds you've planted earlier in the year start bearing fruit for you.
Right. And it's, it's this big misnomer that, you're going to work for yourself and you're going to work less. And it's like, the old adage is I'd rather work 100 hours for myself than 40 hours for somebody else, because at the end of the day, you're working your ass off. You're not,
Right.
It's a never ending thing. I mean, I'm trying to get a better work-life balance and stop working around 6, 7 o'clock. And sometimes I can do that. And sometimes I can't. If something happens, you know what? I got to tend to it. And,
what? I don't believe in work-life balance. I don't believe there's such a thing as balance because we're never balanced. I mean, even if, let's say, business is going well, you're focusing on your relationships, you're not focusing on other things. Or let's say you've got some health issues, so you're focusing on your health, you're not focusing on your relationship. But what I do believe in is harmony. And harmony is about knowing when you need to flow into one aspect or another aspect of your life. Sometimes you want to focus on finances. Sometimes you're focusing on business. Sometimes you're focusing on your social relationships. Sometimes you're focusing on other things. And that's okay. Balance doesn't happen in a day or a week. Balance happens over a long period of time.
Right. Right. I love that. I love that harmony. We were in, turning my heater. We were in Hawaii, November to December. Not the whole month. We were there for like 10 days. And it was so funny because the first 3 days we were there, she's checking her email, I'm checking my email, and we're realizing that it's like 4:30 here and our day is getting started. What the hell I can't do anything. Like there's literally nothing I can do because you're now getting off work. I had one phone call actually with Kofi and one of my other clients, and it was a trip because it's like 7 o'clock at night. We're working out a problem, and I'm in a traffic jam on Palo Wallo Highway. I don't know what highway it was, and to the left is the ocean, to the right is the mountains. And I'm like, you know what? Are we done here? Because I'm done. And that was all the work that I did. I had, because it was like, we're there, we're 5 hours behind everybody else. We can't work because by the time we're waking up, everyone's going home. So it was the best thing ever.
But that's the whole point of a vacation, is to unplug. Because here's the thing.
But we never had a vacation before.
Oh, yeah. You see, that's a big mistake.
But, here's what happened. Because, she works for a steel company.
Okay.
And she only had X amount of days for vacation. I mean, I could do whatever. But so she had 2 weeks. Then she had 3 weeks. So what would we do? We would go to New York in the summer to see my family. We would go to Pittsburgh in the winter to see her family. And then maybe we'd take a long weekend. We didn't have the time. So when, it was like, now we have 4 weeks, we're going away. And I saw a meme about a month before we left that said, everything works better when it's rebooted, including you. And it,
Exactly.
and it was the best thing because now we know we're going to be going on vacation every year.
There's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it called The Diamond Cutter. And it's by this author, Geshe Michael Roach, who is a former Buddhist monk, or he's a Buddhist monk. And what happened was he was in this monastery in New Jersey. And after being there for many years, his lama, his teacher, kind of kicked him out and said, okay, now you have to go out and go into the real world and make money and use these Buddhist principles. And so he went to the Diamond District of Manhattan because he always liked gems. And he managed to get a job at a gem startup in the Diamond District. But he used his Buddhist principles to help him to grow that business, which eventually they sold to Warren Buffett for $250 million.
Wow.
And one of his principles in the book is about he negotiated getting every Wednesday off. And not only would he get Wednesday off, but he would go out, he'd walk, he'd meditate, he'd do absolutely nothing to do with business. And so then when he'd come back on Thursday, he was refreshed, renewed, he'd be more productive, and he'd come up with more ideas of how to do things better, that it was better than if he had worked 5 days straight through. Now, most of us can't really negotiate that, but it just shows the importance of taking time away from whatever you're working on. And kind of when you're in business for yourself, you're not in business for yourself. You're actually in business for all your customers.
100%.
You're actually, your customers now become all your bosses.
Right.
But it's still important, even if you can't take a full day off, a little bit of time, like schedule a half hour or 15 minutes or 45 minutes in the middle of your day to do nothing. To play around, I don't care if it's watching TV, even though that's not the best thing, but go for a walk, sit and meditate.
Play with the dogs.
Play with the dog. Absolutely. Yeah. Play with the dogs. If you got a hobby, do your hobby in the middle of the day. So then when you come back, you're more renewed, you're more refreshed. And psychologically, it's just so much better for us.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, because when we give ourselves that time. So what I did in the summer last year, I did that. I took a half hour out of every day to play with the dogs. I knew that one dog was dying. And so I had to give him attention and, clean him and take care of him. And then I had to give the puppy attention because, she was watching. And I mean, they did not get along. She loved him. He did not love her. He was an American Eskimo and he was just, oh my God. He was like, 12 and a half and she was not even a year at that point. He's like, hey kid, get off my lawn. Like, just get away from me and, whatever. But I made time to really, spend with him and with her. And in the summer, it's easy. I find it easier in the summer, especially here because I'm in Indiana. I have my backyard. I don't walk in the cold. Like when I lived in New York, I walked freaking everywhere. And it didn't matter if it was snowing. It didn't matter if it was like 10 below zero and my nose was going to fall off and I was in Central Park. But for whatever reason now, and maybe it's because I'm a lot older, but now it's like, I want to be in the house in front of my fireplace and I'm not going to go out. But you're right. It's really important to take that time. I practice mindfulness. And I don't take the time during the day, but I try to do it in the morning and before I go to sleep, which is kind of, it's at the end of the day. My mindfulness coach today was like, you need to start meditating. You need to start taking the time. If you look at my calendar, 8:30 every morning, I have meditate every single day. Ask me how many times I meditate at 8:30 in the morning. Never. And she goes, it's on your damn calendar. I'm like, I know, but I got to get up and feed them. And, by the time all that's done, but there are excuses, you have to make the time.
Right. But if it doesn't work for you, you find what does work for you. So if 8:30 in the morning doesn't work for you, then schedule it at a different time that will work for you. But
I don't know how to shut that off in the middle of the day because once I'm going, I'm going.
Then do it at the end of the day. Do it right before you have dinner or do it right after dinner. What really saved me and my wife during the pandemic is because we live near Central Park every night after dinner, we'd go for a walk in Central Park. And even in if it was cold, if it was snowing, we'd still go for a walk. And there were some nights we didn't get out until 9, 10 o'clock at night, and we'd walk. And people were like, "You're crazy. It's dangerous in Central Park at night." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
No, it's not.
There was nobody there. It was
especially during the pandemic, nobody was
right.
Yeah.
But you do get kind of some cool things. Like one night I saw a coyote crossing in front of us, like about 100 yards up. 100 feet up, there was a coyote walked across the road and then like down into a little gully in Central Park. And then I looked it up online. First I thought, oh, there's a wild dog. And I thought, wait a minute, that was a little too big to be a dog. And at first, I don't know, was it a coyote? And so I looked it up, and it turns out there were wild coyotes that they sometimes find in Central Park in New York City. They come down from the north. But taking that walk, we would do that minimum 3-4 times a week.
Wow.
And now, unfortunately, we don't do it quite as much, but we still do it. Like my wife's like, we're going for a walk tonight. I'm like, okay, good.
Right.
Because we're walkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had this great experience this summertime where we went to the West Coast, and we stayed on the West Coast for 3 months, and we were like dog sitting for people in different places. And we don't own a dog. Like, I don't believe in keeping a dog in an apartment. It's not really much space.
Yeah, it's different there.
But I dog sat, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was a pain in the ass in some ways, but it was wonderful in other ways because, every morning you had to get up, you walk the dog. Afternoon, you go out, you walk the dog. So it like made you kind of get out. And so, and when I'd walk the dogs, I wouldn't be on my phone. I might take it out once in a while to take a picture of the dog or take a picture of where I was, or it was a beautiful scene. But I'd be looking at the scenery. I'd be looking at the houses. I'd be looking at what's around, because also it's all new to me. Like I've visited the West Coast. I love California. I love visiting, but I've never lived. And this was like, we lived in someone's house for a month, taking care of their dog, going to the local supermarket, going out to the local restaurants, and really got a feel for what it was like to live somewhere else. And it was really a wonderful experience.
Wow, that sounds pretty amazing. We open the door, let them run in the yard, let them back in. We don't walk them. Although we said, now that Piper is getting older, starting, the springtime, we're going to get out and get into the habit of, really walking them so that we can A, get off of our asses, but B, have them in their space, like seeing other dogs and knowing how to, react and act and all that stuff. So, a lot of people listening to the show are also seasoned entrepreneurs. What obstacles have you overcome? What issues have you had that you've come out, the other side of, that, you've kind of gone through some crap and came out, the other end, like, glad that's over?
The biggest obstacle I overcame was the business I had before I started doing the radio station, because I got involved with real estate after the aerospace business. And initially, I got my license, but I didn't really want to be a sales agent. But I got involved with this broker who was supposed to teach me and mentor me through a development project. And we looked around at different things. And then eventually he brought to me this project in Queens where it was a 4-story building, but the area had recently gotten rezoned, and now we could build a 6-story building. But it was only like one little piece of it. And so we got it. And then there was one tenant who wouldn't move out. And eventually I negotiated for the seller to get the tenant out. But by the time that happened, the guy who owned the building next to it wanted to sell it. So bought those 2 buildings. And now we had a lot that we could knock down the building and build up a 6-story building and do the whole thing. Thought this was great. And then the crash, the 2007, 2008 market crash happened. Now, this mentor, he had supposed to co-sign on the construction loan, because I had no experience doing this, but he had experience. So he was supposed to co-sign on it. But because of all the delays and everything else, we didn't have time to knock down the building and get in the foundation before the bank pulled the construction loan. And then he disappeared. And like he went to literally another state, and people were calling me up afterwards. Hey, do you know what happened to him? And I'm like, no, why? It was, oh, he stole our money and we're looking for him. We're hiring a private investigator. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, 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 yeah.
good luck. But I mean, and this guy left me high and dry, and I did everything I could. I mean, we had a hard money loan. I'm paying out every month. I'm throwing good money after bad until finally my wife says to me, she goes, sometimes you just have to quit. There's no shame in just quitting when things aren't working.
Right.
And so we finally decided to let it go. We sold off the building at a loss. We lost everything we put into it. I lost, a couple of $1 million. But I learned a valuable lesson. Number one, was I really that interested in real estate? No, I mean, it was kind of interesting, but not really. I was really doing it out of greed. I was really doing it because I saw just the money I could make. So number one, you don't do anything just for the sake of making money. If you just want to make money, go out and keep your job,
Yeah.
The other thing too I learned is I'm not built to swim with the sharks. And like there were all kinds of horror stories. Like after I had people calling me up in the middle of it. Oh, I have this project. I just need to save it. I have everything put into it. You have no idea how many people got wiped out by that market, by that crash. And so I was not built to swim with the sharks. I didn't cover my ass. I'm a nice guy. I'm like, I trust people, So it was like, I'm not built for that. I need to find something where I'm working with good people, not people who are going to screw you.
Right.
There are certain personality types, like they know how to deal with those kinds of people. I'm not one of them. And so it really was a valuable lesson of doing what I'm built for, doing what I'm designed for, not what anybody else is doing, and not just for the sake of making a buck.
Right. And it's funny because when I first started my business, for me, it was out of necessity. I got fired. And it was like, I knew that if I went out and I found another job, I'd get another job, I'd have my insurance, it would be the same thing. But it was like, I wasn't meant for that. I have never been meant to work for anybody. And like, any job that I ever had, I knew that if I tell you that I probably had the worst bosses that people have ever had in the world, and my wife can attest to it, usually it's a common denominator and it's me. It wasn't me. I mean, these people were just like mean. And I kept, it was like the universe was trying to tell me for the longest time, do your own thing. And I was like, no, I'm going to get another job. But like, I never listened to it.
You see, I would disagree with you though. You see, because you're still the common denominator, because the real question is, what was it that attracted you to the energy of that job? Because I'm a big believer that unconsciously we actually know what we're going into.
You're right. You're right about that.
So I think maybe you were just trying to convince yourself by finding like the worst situations, you really had to convince yourself to go out on your own, that there was some fear or some inner struggle that kept you from just going out and doing things on your own and really trusting yourself, that you had to keep putting yourself in these bad situations until it just got so bad that you were like, okay, that's it. I'm done. Next time I get fired, I'm never going back.
Yeah.
I mean, I consider myself unemployable now.
Oh, me too. I just had that conversation with a friend of mine, and we were like, no one can hire us, because I would be like, there's no way, but that would happen in my jobs. It's like they would hire me to do a job, and then they would tell me how to do it. And it's like, then, well, why the hell did you hire me?
Right.
So, but you're right. I think for a really long time, I didn't believe in myself. I felt that I knew enough to be dangerous. And, I think it goes back to imposter syndrome, right? And I think everybody still, we get these moments. Last week I was in a call, and new client, great client. And for a minute I had that, do I belong in this room? And as soon as it came in my head, it was like, yeah, you do. Just goodbye, get out of my head. But where that lasts 10 seconds now, that used to last for like a week. Do I belong in this room? Should I really be doing this? Oh my God, what if oh my God, what if I fail? Oh my God. Um, and now that I'm in the place that I'm at and I'm confident and I'm successful and, all the things, I look back on it and it's like, why didn't I do this 10, 20 years earlier? And it
Because
was
you weren't ready.
I wasn't ready at all, at all. And now I laugh because it's like, like you said, I'm unemployable. There's no way I would be doing anything else. I love what I do. I started the podcast because, well, Kofi and I've had friends for a year being like, you need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. And I finally pulled the trigger, and it's like the best thing I ever did because I have so much fun with this. I have people saying that I should, monetize it. Oops. And it's not about that for me at this point. Like right now, I love the people that I have on the show. I love learning everything that I'm learning. And, I don't even know how to monetize it, to be honest. I use a Shure mic. Is Shure gonna, he's like is Shure gonna,
Talk to me.
give me sponsorship? All right, we'll talk. But I use, and like it was funny because I started talking about oh my God, Toastmasters and all these things, and I'm like, hey, we're plugging you here, and we're not, we're just having like conversations, but it was just pretty funny. But I love this. This is like so much fun for me, and when I meet people, it's like, hey, if I think they're a good fit, it's like, I have a podcast. I'd love to have you on. And, like you, they're like, absolutely, let's do this. And that makes me feel better than anything.
Yeah.
Because, it goes, what, Sally Field, you like me, you really like me. It's not that. It's really not that. But it's that, we all have something to say. We all have a message to get out there. And the fact that I can give people a platform to do that just like tickles the hell out of me. It's fun.
And the thing that's interesting about what you were saying before around the imposter syndrome and not feeling like you're supposed to be in the room. Successful entrepreneurs, people who are making millions and millions of dollars a year, deal with the same thing. It's so fascinating. If you get a group of highly successful people together and you ask them what is their number one challenge, almost all of them will give you the same kinds of things. Because it's a constant battle of, even you're confident to a certain point, then you make a certain amount of money. But then if you start going past that and you surpass it and you're making more money, it's like, oh, do I really deserve to be making this much money? And then you work on yourself and you keep with the personal development, and then, okay, I do. And then you do good, and then you do even better. Then it's like, oh my God, do I deserve to make $10 million a year? Oh my God, do I deserve
how do
to
you
make
say no at that
$20 million?
point? Like to me, I haven't even hit 1 million, but when I do hit 1 million, am I going to think that I deserve that? Hell yes, because I've been working my ass off.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think it for me, it might be different. I think, I don't have a college degree. I have a GED, and here I am. I had a rough upbringing, and I busted my ass to get where I am. And so I 100% believe that I deserve, where I'm at, what I'm doing. So that I don't think I have the problem with. I think because I don't have a college degree and because I don't, have a high school diploma and that I have a GED, that's when I get, or where I used to get, do I belong in this room? And then I realized it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. My wife has a master's in material science, and she said something, I don't know, it was like a couple of years ago. And she's not an elitist. She is, and anyone who knows her can attest, she is the most kind, wonderful woman that like you would ever meet, right? But she made an elitist comment, and it was about school. It was about somebody not having their degree. And I went, I don't have my degree. She goes, that's different. And that's not what I meant. And I went, it's not different. And I got like totally defensive. I was like, no, but I realized that was where a lot of my insecurities were coming from, was that I don't have a degree. These, women that are running $1 million, businesses and multi-million-dollar businesses or men, whoever, have these degrees. And then I
You know,
ran
there
across
was this,
people that don't.
there was a statistic I used to quote years ago. I don't know if it's still true, but something like at the time, 70% of all millionaires never graduated high school.
Yeah.
That actually, the more education you had, the less likely you were to be a successful entrepreneur, businessman.
Wow.
Because our educational system was actually formulated to take farmers off of the farm and prepare them for being factory workers. But they couldn't do it with existing farmers because they were too old and too set with their ways, so they had to start with kids. So when the Industrial Revolution came around, they were the corporations were like, we need workers for these factories, and the group psychologist time said you got to start when they're young. And so our whole education system, unless you're going to like a Montessori school or one of those kinds of schools, is all based on following authority, being on time, doing what you're told, which is what you need in a good factory worker. Like,
Right.
you can't have a dozen
Wow.
people on a line trying to screw a screw a dozen different ways, because it doesn't work for an assembly line. Everyone needs to screw the screw in the exact same way, in the exact position it's supposed to be in. So there's no room for creativity. So our education system is designed to squash creativity in a way, unless you're a fine arts major, right? So it's actually, just because you don't have an education doesn't mean you don't have what it takes to be successful.
Right.
Because personally, I think smarts is ingrained.
Oh, yeah.
Real wisdom comes from experience.
Yeah.
Real wisdom is not something you learn in school.
Well, and they'd say, what school did you go to? And the joke was, the school of hard knocks, but it's true.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
that's
and nowadays schools are also becoming irrelevant, because you can practically learn anything you want to learn online.
I know.
And as long as you're motivated and you're willing to put the time in, you could learn anything. I mean, Harvard has classes online that are free.
Yeah.
And I think, like, more and more, this whole the way society is around education, it's turning actually more into a social thing. And it's like what's the main reason to go to an Ivy League school? It's to make connections with those people who are going to also be running other public companies. It's all about the connections that eventually going to happen. But if you want to work for yourself, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to create a successful business, it's all about doing it.
right.
It's not about staying in school forever.
Right. And there are some people that are career students.
Sure.
I mean, and that's the path they choose. But that's where, and I know, that's where all of my insecurity came from. And then when I got to the point that, I know my shit and I'm, damn good at what I do and all that other stuff, it made things just a lot easier, a lot, different. And I think that's another reason that I dealt with those jobs, was because I didn't have a degree and I couldn't get other jobs that I really might have, gotten if I did have a degree. So, because of that also put that like almost stigma,
Right.
in my head. Oh, well, I can't get that job because I don't have that degree. And I thought about going back to school and doing all that, but honestly, I think it just came to a point that it was like, I'm just going to keep on keeping on. And I'm glad I did, because I don't know that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. If I wasn't, I mean, everything happens for a reason, right? So, so in everything, that you're doing with talk radio, can we talk about the thing that we started talking about, or do you not want to talk about that? Because it was,
we can talk about it. I mean, my new up and coming venture.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting, and I'm not going to tell my story only because we're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
but you got to hear that. But go ahead and kind of touch on that for a little bit.
I've been going to the Horizons conference, which is the longest running psychedelic research conference that's been going on here in New York City in Cooper Union, very famous school. And it's it was initially organized by MAPS, the organization that's funding all the research into psilocybin and MDMA, FDA clinical trials and stuff. But there's been a real renaissance in the psychedelics industry. And what most people don't know, and I highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, go to Netflix and watch the documentary How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. It's wonderful. It gives you great background and tells you everything about like what's going on in the past with the industry, how we got to where we are and where we are today. But there's a real renaissance about the healing opportunity with psychedelics and how really they were outlawed because of Nixon wanting to crack down on the anti-war protesters. But I've been going to the conference for several years, and I've been noticing something in the industry. I'm on several mailing lists that there's all this emphasis on doing the medicine. Like people are flying down to Peru or Costa Rica and they're drinking ayahuasca, or they're doing psilocybin. I mean, who's the famous football player? Aaron Rodgers, like talked about how he had his success was because he did ayahuasca. And people are doing all this medicine, but nobody's really focusing on, I mean, a couple of people are, but not really. There's so few people focusing on, well, what happens after the fact? Like and it's not just for psychedelics. I mean, it's also true of like going to a seminar where you get all pumped up and all excited and rah, rah, rah. But what happens after the fact? Because what happens is people go down to Peru or they have this experience and they come back home and they think they're going to change their life, but they have no support, no community, and they don't know how to integrate it into their day-to-day life. And so I'm actually looking to do some market research calls all on psychedelic integration. Like what kind of support do people really need after they've had some kind of experience, and work with them on, and I have sort of a framework in mind, but I really want to talk to people about it, about, you know, how to take this peak experience and then how to integrate it into your daily life so you can actually change your life and not just fall back into the same patterns.
So is it by doing psychedelics every day, or is it just
no, it's about
you've done it,
now what?
Okay, I hear you.
We call it like the journey after the journey. It's like, okay, you've had a journey, you've had an experience, now what do you do? Because life is lived in our day-to-day life.
Right.
You know, I think there was a book written called The Dash. And you know what the dash is?
What?
The dash is where we live our life. The dash is the dash on our tombstone, because there's a birth date and a death date, and there's a dash in between those two dates.
Okay.
And it's that dash in between those two dates where we live our life.
Wow.
And you can use those, and those can be any two dates. It doesn't have to be your birth date and death date. It could be between your first ceremony and your last ceremony, but life is lived in the dash.
Wow.
And so that's where we got to focus on. It's all about the present moment. It's about where we are right here, right now. How are we showing up? Are we being present to our life? Are we dealing with these uncomfortable feelings that maybe we need to process? Are we having those uncomfortable conversations with people that we know we really should be having, but we're avoiding? Like, that's how you change your life. That's how you really start to live a more fulfilled, more harmonious life.
Wow. That's pretty intense. I'm never going to look at that, the same again, but it's true. I mean, and I just did an Enneagram because a friend of mine was like, she's a 4, and I'm like, what is that even? And so she started explaining stuff. So before we got on the call, I hopped on, I did an Enneagram. I found out I'm an 8, and it's so freaking accurate that it's like scary.
Yep.
Except some of the negative stuff on there, I'm like, that might've been me 5 years ago.
Right.
Because I think that comes from insecurity. But I'm definitely a leader. I'm definitely, I'm not a follower. And seeing that kind of made me laugh, because it was like my whole life, I have never been afraid of confrontation. Like so many people I know they want to keep the peace. They want to keep it nice. And it's like, it's not about keeping the peace. It's about, if you don't talk about the hard things, you're never going to get past the hard things. They're always going to be there. So you have to confront it. You have to get over it. You have to get through it. And so I love that. I love that dash thing. I'm gonna have to do something with that.
Yeah, I did a whole episode on life is lived in the dash.
Yeah.
And actually, because I do my own show. It's called the Conscious Consultant Hour, and you can find us on all the major podcasting platforms and some of the minor ones too. But if you look for the Conscious Consultant Hour, and if you look for dash in the title, you'll hear my episode where I talk all about that.
Okay, I'm gonna do that for sure. I because I think that just kind of blew my mind a little because now I'm seeing a
Mm.
headstone with the dash going, you know. So, um,
Cool.
well, first off, I want to say thank you for joining me for this, hour. And see, it goes fast. Like people are
Yeah.
like an hour. I'm like, you have no idea how fast it goes.
Yep.
It just goes so
Absolutely.
fast, and we could talk easily for like another 2 hours, probably.
Probably
Um,
3.
Probably more. So we'll do it over like Knishes in New York in the summer.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. You got to promise me you'll look me up.
I promise. Well, we'll exchange info, and yeah,
Yeah,
I'll call you. We'll stay in touch for sure. So,
absolutely. I'd love to.
um, so the last question that I always ask, all my guests is, what lights your fire? Like,
Mm.
what is your passion? And it could be personal, professional, whatever. But what lights Sam up?
I really I do a lot of different things, but there is one kind of umbrella that it all falls under, which is, kind of when you know your life's purpose, like what are you here for? Suddenly things make a lot more sense. And what I'm here for is to help with the unfolding of consciousness on the planet. It's helping people to live a more conscious, more awake, more aware life. And so what lights me up is when I can share a message or work with someone personally that I know is helping them through some difficult challenge, or is helping them to see things in a new perspective, in a new way. So like knowing that like now you'll never see the dash again in the same way, like that
Right.
totally lights me up for the evening. And that really does it, because I mean, when we help other people, it's such a gift, and to me, it just feels so good. Like that's what I'm all about. I mean, for me, my life is about service. It's about what's called a servant leader. I'm a leader too, but I do it through service.
Yes. And we'll have this conversation another time, but I am also here to be of service. Like I know that without a doubt.
Mhm.
And like I said, we'll definitely talk more about this because I think there's a lot of symbiosis here. But um, thank you so much for being on, and to all of you people out there that are listening and watching. I want to thank you too. I hope that you're getting really good information from my guests. I don't know about you. I'm having a ball with this. I just love um, each guest after the next guest because I just learned so much more. And now I guarantee you're never going to think of the dash the same again either. So, but I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you. Don't forget to share, like, download. If there's information in here that you found, share it. Share it on social media. But for now, I'm going to sign off, Iris Goldfeder, and go out and find what lights your fire. See you next time, everyone. Bye.